Some cars made history for their style, speed, or innovation. These, they made history for all the wrong reasons. From design disasters to engines that gave up faster than their owners. These are the top 10 worst cars in US history. And wait until you see the one at number 1. It wasn't just bad, it was a nationwide punchline. Number 10, Chrysler Sebring, 1995 to 2010. On paper, the Chrysler Sebring looked like a solid choice for the average American driver. It came in both coupe and convertible forms, promising a mix of affordability, comfort, and style. For years, rental car companies stocked their lots with Sebrings because they were cheap, roomy, and, at least at first glance, respectable. But once you actually drove one, the illusion shattered. The handling was sloppy, the interiors were filled with cheap plastics, and the engines were notoriously underpowered and unreliable. Owners reported electrical gremlins, transmission failures, and dashboards that rattled after only a few months. By the 2000s, the Sebring had become infamous for one thing: mediocrity. Even critics who normally went easy on affordable cars couldn't resist taking jabs. One reviewer joked that driving a Sebring made you feel like you rented a car for life. And despite attempts at refreshes, Chrysler never managed to shake the car's reputation. By the time it was discontinued in 2010, the Sebring had earned a permanent spot on worst cars ever lists. Number 9, Chevrolet Chevette, 1976 to 1987. If the Sebring was forgettable, the Chevrolet Chevette was unforgettable, for all the wrong reasons. Born during the oil crisis, GM rushed this tiny subcompact onto the market as their answer to fuel-efficient imports like the Toyota Corolla and Honda Civic. On paper, it was supposed to be cheap, simple, and reliable transportation for the masses. What America got instead was, well, a car that became the butt of nearly every car joke in the 1980s. The Chevette's underpowered 4-cylinder struggled to get out of its own way, taking nearly 15 seconds to reach 60 miles per hour. Its ride was rough, the cabin felt cramped and dated, and rust seemed to appear almost as soon as it left the dealer lot. And yet, despite all its flaws, the Chevette sold over 2.7 million units in the US alone, proving that sometimes being cheap enough is enough to move metal. Still, its legacy is less about success and more about survival. When people look back, the Chevette isn't remembered with nostalgia. It's remembered as the car that defined automotive misery for a decade. Number 8, Lincoln Versailles, 1977 to 1980. When Lincoln decided to take on Cadillac in the late 1970s, the company needed a compact luxury car to compete with the popular Seville. Their solution? The Lincoln Versailles. But instead of designing a new vehicle worthy of the Lincoln name, Ford simply took the humble Ford Granada, slapped on a new grille, added a padded vinyl roof, and called it a day. Buyers weren't fooled. The Versailles cost thousands more than the Granada it was based on, but offered the same underwhelming performance and cramped interior. To make matters worse, it arrived just as the fuel crisis and recession were making buyers extra picky about value. For many, paying luxury prices for a disguised Granada felt like daylight robbery. Number 7, DeLorean DMC-12, 1981 to 1983. Few cars ever launched with more hype than the DeLorean. Backed by former GM executive John DeLorean, the car promised futuristic stainless steel styling, exotic gull-wing doors, and the thrill of driving something straight out of a science fiction sketchbook. On paper, it looked like the next great American sports car. The reality? A massive disappointment. The underpowered 2.85-liter V6, borrowed from Peugeot, Renault, and Volvo, produced only about 130 horsepower. For a sports car, it struggled to reach 60 miles per hour in over 10 seconds. Quality control was even worse. Misaligned panels, weak electrical systems, and rattles straight from the factory. Owners loved the way it looked parked in the driveway, but hated the way it drove. The company collapsed in just 2 years, building only about 9,000 cars. Ironically, Hollywood later turned the DeLorean into a time-traveling legend in Back to the Future, cementing its cult status. But strip away the movie magic and you're left with one of the most overhyped failures in US automotive history. Number 6, Plymouth Reliant and Dodge Aries K-Cars, 1981 to 1989. In the early 1980s, Chrysler was on the brink of collapse. Their big gamble to survive, the Plymouth Reliant and Dodge Aries, better known as the K-Cars. These boxy sedans were supposed to represent a new era of affordable, efficient, front-wheel drive family cars. To be fair, the K-Cars did play a role in saving Chrysler financially, but just because they sold well doesn't mean they were good. Styling was painfully bland. Think squared-off edges and vinyl roofs that looked outdated the day they rolled off the line. Interiors were bare bones, squeaky, and prone to falling apart. And while the cars were marketed as reliable, many owners quickly learned otherwise. otherwise, dealing with weak transmissions, rattling trim, and engines that strained under even modest loads. The K-Cars became the symbol of everything unexciting about American cars in the 1980s. For many drivers, they were cheap transportation and nothing more. Critics often joke that if you wanted to know what beige felt like as a driving experience, just buy a K-Car. Number 5. Chevrolet Corvair, 1960 to 1969. Long before Ralph Nader became a household name, the Chevrolet Corvair was already stirring controversy. When it debuted in 1960, the Corvair looked like a daring step forward, a compact American car with a rear-mounted air-cooled engine, something straight out of Europe. It was stylish, innovative, and unlike anything else GM was building at the time. The problem? The engineering didn't match the ambition. Early Corvairs suffered from dangerously unstable handling. The rear suspension design, paired with the rear-mounted engine, made the car prone to sudden oversteer and even rollovers if drivers took corners too quickly. Accidents and lawsuits piled up, and in 1965, Ralph Nader's book Unsafe at Any Speed singled out the Corvair as a prime example of carmakers putting style and cost savings ahead of safety. While GM did fix many of the flaws in later models, the damage was done. Public confidence collapsed, and the Corvair became shorthand for unsafe design. Instead of being remembered as a bold experiment, it's remembered as one of the most dangerous cars America ever put on the road. Number 4. Jeep Compass, 2007 to 2016, first generation. When Jeep announced the Compass, many expected a rugged, trail-ready SUV worthy of the brand's heritage. Instead, what buyers got in 2007 was a flimsy front-wheel drive crossover that seemed allergic to the very idea of off-roading. The Compass was supposed to be Jeep's answer to the growing small SUV market dominated by Honda and Toyota, but with its buzzy four-cylinder engine, cheap plastics, and awkward styling, it fell flat right out of the gate. Owners complained about rough rides, clunky, continuously variable transmissions, and interiors that felt like they were borrowed from a bargain bin economy car. Even worse, the Compass wore the Jeep badge but lacked the rugged DNA. Reviewers mocked it for being the SUV that looked ready for adventure, but was more comfortable shuttling groceries than tackling trails. In fact, its poor reliability and bland design made it one of the least respected Jeeps ever built. Number 3. The Pontiac Sunfire, 1995 to 2005. The Pontiac Aztek usually hogs the spotlight as one of GM's ugliest creations, but its smaller sibling, the Pontiac Sunfire, was no prize either. Launched in the mid-1990s, the Sunfire was supposed to be Pontiac's youthful, sporty compact, a fun alternative to boring economy cars. Instead, it quickly became infamous for awkward styling, poor build quality, and cheap interiors. The Sunfire's design looked like it couldn't decide if it wanted to be edgy or safe, resulting in a mishmash of sharp angles and bulbous curves. Inside, the plastics felt flimsy, the seats wore out quickly, and the controls looked dated almost immediately. Under the hood, the engines were weak, loud, and often plagued with reliability issues, especially the head gaskets on the 2.4-liter twin cam. What really sealed the Sunfire's reputation, though, was how forgettable it felt to drive. Reviewers often said it was the kind of car you only ended up with because it was cheap, or because a rental counter handed you the keys. It was neither sporty nor refined, and it limped through a decade before being quietly replaced. Number 2. Saturn Ion, 2003 to 2007. By the early 2000s, Saturn was GM's different kind of car company, known for quirky touches and plastic body panels. But with the Ion, they took different into the realm of bizarre, and not in a good way. The Ion's most infamous feature? Its center-mounted instrument cluster. Instead of putting the speedometer behind the steering wheel like every other car on the planet, Saturn stuck it in the middle of the dashboard. Drivers constantly had to glance sideways to check their speed. A design so distracting that critics roasted it relentlessly. And that wasn't the only problem. The Ion's cheap interior materials looked and felt outdated the day it launched, while its engines were noisy and uninspired. Early models even used a clunky, continuously variable transmission that was so unreliable, Saturn had to abandon it mid-production. Number 1. Chrysler PT Cruiser, 2001 to 2010. When the Chrysler PT Cruiser debuted, it turned heads with its retro styling. At first, it seemed like a clever throwback, part hot rod, part family hauler. Early sales were strong, and waiting lists even formed at some dealerships. For a brief moment, it looked like Chrysler had a hit. but the shine wore off quickly. Beneath the quirky exterior, the PT Cruiser was built on the same humble platform as the Dodge Neon. That meant weak 4-cylinder engines, unimpressive handling, and build quality that fell short of its bold looks. The interior, while roomy, was filled with cheap plastics that didn't age well, and owners often complained about chronic mechanical issues, from failing electrical systems to overheating problems. By the late 2000s, the PT Cruiser's styling had gone from retro cool to retro cringe. What started as fresh nostalgia became a rolling punchline. Critics routinely placed it on worst cars lists, and by the time Chrysler quietly killed it in 2010, its reputation was sealed as one of the biggest letdowns in modern American car history.